Hey y'all, so here's what happened today. You notice you woke up this morning, X was down, ChatGPT was down. That's because we had another major internet outage. What I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about it, what it means for the common person, and steps that you can take to protect yourself. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Cloudflare had a major outage today, this morning. Causes error messages across the internet, as this article says. Basically, this company, it defends millions of websites against malicious attacks, and then all of a sudden, some type of way, it was down this morning. Let's look at this tweet from my boy, Unusual Whales. Cloudflare is still reporting issues worldwide right now. ChatGPT, Claude, Twitter, Spotify, and many other services are affected. We take a look at this. I'm just going to pull up some data that we're going to talk about real quick, because this is the third outage that I can remember. We had two from AWS and now this one from Cloudflare. But let's look. I pulled up some data. Here's 5 significant outages from the past 6 months, including the one today from Cloudflare. So we have the one today. Look, Cloudflare handles 20%. 20%. Let me blow this up a little bit more so we can see it. Here are the articles backing this up. Business Insider, AP News, The Guardian. Let's go back to this. Cloudflare, what happened today? 20% of all websites in traffic. 20% were down. That's ChatGPT, X, Canva. I get a lot of my news from sites like that. They were gone. I was blind today. October 20th. We remember the big AWS one. 15 hours. That one was down. AWS handles 30% of global cloud, and it had a huge cascade effect. So Snapchat, Roblox, Duolingo, all down. Here's another one. The 29th, Azure, Microsoft Azure was down for 8 hours. It's a large share of the global cloud. So what is that? That's your Microsoft 365, Minecraft, Xbox, everything associated with Microsoft. Also, this stuff, it has a lot of implications on what people do for work. For example, if you have a job and it's primarily online and there's a lot of cloud work being done, chances are you're using either Azure or AWS. The ones for GCP, that's been holding up, but hey man, I'm terribly afraid that we're going to get a Google outage at some point in time. And I'm going to get into what that means for the regular person. I got 2 more to go over that happened. And remember, this list right here is just from November to September. So Vodafone, I guess is the UK. It was out for a few hours. Millions of customers in the UK, their mobile and broadband lost connectivity. So the internet was cooked for them. And then this one, Optus, this was September 18th. This is Australia. This is their emergency calling system. Boy. Emergency calls failed for many. At least 600 failed calls. And look at this right here. I just want to blow this up. Multiple deaths linked. So people died because of this outage. Now, let me tell you, what does this mean for the common person? Why is this such a big deal to me when you look at this list and you think about what happened today? I'm going to tell you a couple things. So, with the outage today, I was just looking on Twitter. That was down. There was nothing that could be done. With AWS, when it went down for 15 hours, there was nothing that could be done. Think about the implications that this has on a person and their job and their money, okay? And what all is going on with all the AI hype and things like that. We are preparing ourselves for an absolute disaster financially. Because if people are doing things to where all their money is concentrated in something that mainly has to do with AWS, i.e. Robinhood, if the stock market crashes, AWS crashes, then you can't get your money out of Robinhood. This is why I emphasize, and that's just one of them, but this is why I emphasize, when you invest, you need to invest money that you don't feel like you absolutely need. So all these people who are trying to get you to invest in margin, who are trying to get you to invest all your life savings on some stuff that's meaningless, all that has to happen is a little AWS outage and you are absolutely cooked. Okay? So financially, be wise. What's another thing that you should think about financially? Now, this one it is what it is, but you got to understand that if it happens, everything is cooked. And that's the money that you have in the bank. That's your money that you have in your savings accounts. Even the ones that I talk about all the time, the high yield savings accounts. If we're in a society where there's a bank run that happens, but the banks are operating through an online cloud provider, something like AWS, Azure, GCP, the website can only be accessed via a service like Cloudflare, then that bank run is going to be the people who get their money out, and it's going to be the people who are caught because their money is stuck in the bank that they can't have access to online. And if you try to go to the bank in person, they're not going to have your money. What's happened with the money supply in the United States is that most of it is digital. There's very few places where they really have cash like that. But I guess the solace that you can take in that is that if that happens, then everything's cooked. It's all over anyway. At that point, money ain't going to be the thing on people's minds. It's going to be food. But let's talk about if the whole bank run scenario thing doesn't happen. How can you make your money work for you in that sense? This is another thing that I emphasize. The emergency fund. The 6 to 12 month emergency fund. Say that an outage, okay, an AWS outage, or like today, Cloudflare or something, say that an outage happens long enough to put your business out of business, make your employment go away. If you're working for a corporation, and maybe it's a smaller one, and an outage like this happens, and it happens long enough to where the customers are not getting what they're supposed to get from the business, there is a good chance that business could fail. If that business fails and you're no longer employed, what do you have to rely on as far as your finances go? This is why you need to have an emergency fund, because you never know what can happen. This exposes a lot of weaknesses in the system. The problem that's happened is that now there's so much reliance on just these concentrated services. So now, if you look back at the stats again, just to show you, now if AWS goes out, that's 30% of the internet gone. Cloudflare, that's 20% of the internet gone. Azure, no email, no, for example, all of you out here who play video games for a living, hey man, you're cooked. What happens if Xbox stops working and that's what you're playing your stuff on? So you need to have a plan. You need to have an emergency fund. And this is one thing that I haven't mentioned on this channel, but it's something to keep in mind, especially when it comes to your financials. If this happens at a large enough scale, at that point, we're not talking about finances. At that point, we're talking about emergency preparedness. So along with getting out of debt and building an emergency fund and simplifying your life, here's a fourth thing that you need to do. You probably need to have a supply of food and water in your house, and you probably need to have something like a bag that you can just grab and take in case of emergency. Typically, people have these things in case of natural disaster, but if you're dealing with a situation where there's an outage, say for example, I mean, these are also used in infrastructure. So things like the water plant, the sewage plant, for example, electricity, the electricity grid, we're so concentrated that those things could go out. And so at that point, you need to have the essentials that you need to live. Yes, money is all great and everything, but you need to have stuff that you can use to live. Food, water, a bag with food and water and supplies that you can take in case you got to leave home. Now, let me tie this back to financials again, telling you what the regular person can do and how you should prepare now. Because when you look at these things, going back to the data again, one more time, when you look at these things, these are 5 significant outages in the last 6 months. But when you look at the list, this isn't the last 6 months. This is the last 3. This is November, October, and September. Look at the pattern. See the pattern. Be wise. Look at it. So if there's something to where there's a major outage that starts to affect infrastructure, that starts to affect how people can function, what does this have to do with financials to where if you get your finances together, it'll help you during that time? Let me tell you why. This is the real game. While they're having you go out here and buy all this useless stuff like an Apple Pocket to put your iPhone in, What you need to do is be getting out of credit card debt, building an emergency fund, and simplifying your life. When you do those things like simplify your life, you will be able to afford these materials that you need in case of a disaster. Instead of going out and buying some useless product that you won't be using after a week, you need to go buy some reserve food. You need to go buy some water. You need to go get a bag that you can just take in case of emergency. So be prepared. And yes, things do connect. Your finances do connect with how you can prepare for something like this. Because if you're running around and all you're in is credit card debt, when things like this happen, you're not prepared because you don't have the supplies that you need. So, that's in the news today. Comment below, let me know what you think. And hey, y'all have a good one. Bye-bye.